Welcome to the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast, presented by the Beef Cattle Research Council, the most popular content from beefresearch.ca, available on the go. Before we get into this week's episode, a quick message from the BCRC.
Ensuring newborn calves consume colostrum is one of the most important management strategies cow-calf operations can implement to promote healthy calves. Colostrum provides essential antibodies to a calf with virtually no immune system. Colostrum also contains fats, vitamins, proteins, and other immune cells essential to provide the calf energy, warmth, and the local immunity it requires to thrive in the first few days of life. It is crucial for producers to observe newborn calves to make sure they have received colostrum and to intervene if necessary. Learn more about handling colostrum by clicking the link in the show notes. There are many different methods of calving cows, and there is no single perfect system. For some producers, adopting the Sandhills calving system has improved herd health and time management at a busy time of year. Named by a University of Nebraska professor who developed the idea, some refer to it as leave-behind calving, the drop-back method, or strategic calving management. The Sandhills system involves moving pregnant cows onto different, clean ground while leaving freshly calved pairs in the field they were born in. This method helps minimize direct contact between older calves and younger calves and reduces the transfer of viruses and the buildup of disease-causing pathogens in the calving area. Regardless of what producers call it, moving pregnant cows to calve on clean ground and leaving freshly calved pairs remaining in their pasture is a practical way to improve health and reduce scours at calving. John Smith, who ranches west of Nanton, Alberta, tried the Sandhills system for the first time during the 2022 calving season, based on the advice of his vet clinic, Veterinary Agri-Health Services, VAHS. At one time, the commercial Angus-based cow-calf operation calved in late February. That can be pretty challenging, so we kept dropping calving dates back and adapted some different practices, Smith explains, saying they now use April 1st as a target start date and may consider moving it back later. Smith says they used to pair out as cows calved, moving pairs to clean ground. After talking with VAHS, they decided to try the Sandhills method to reduce sickness in calves, and they moved his expectant females to fresh pastures in 3 different moves. "I liked it. We'll do it again," says John. Like any new practice, he says there was a learning curve to determine how to manage pastures and make the best use of their facilities, but the reduction in sickness and treatment rates made it worthwhile. "We had no scours, and I had half or a third of a bottle of medicine from the year before and still have it," he says. This was a much different outcome than what Smith experienced a couple of years prior when extremely wet weather during calving prompted a severe scours outbreak. Smith kept his first calvers together in a separate 60-acre field for calving. He maintains a strict 25-day breeding season to ensure calves arrive in a narrow window. For the first big move sorting through soon-to-be moms, they had 4 riders. "We moved 300 cows and 100 stayed behind," he says. Once the pregnant cows understood which pasture they were being herded to, John says they were eager to go. "It happened fast. It only took an hour," he says, but adds that he did have to take a bit of additional time the next day to clean up stragglers. Consolidating all the pairs into one group took some planning. "We had 3 fields with quite a few pairs, actually 4 counting heifers," Smith explains. "It felt like there were fields of cattle everywhere," he says, but added, "There is an optimum time frame to mix groups of cattle without having an adverse outcome, health-wise." They combined herds of cow-calf pairs during processing in May. John tags his calves at birth, then at spring processing, cows and calves are vaccinated. "We don't have a conventional branding, there's no brand, but we do have pretty good management software," he says, adding they use their record-keeping program to identify and sort individual animals through the chute as they process them in May. John is looking ahead to future calving seasons, knowing that each year has its own unique circumstances and improvements will be made as needed. "I'm looking forward to year 5 or year 7 in my rotation," he says. "Get water set up properly, have a little more shelter, have the land set up, and make it a little handier." Kelsey and John Beasley operate Integrity Ranching near Youngstown, Alberta. These livestock producers are continually evolving and currently run a yearling and sheep operation. At one time, they calved 900 cows using the Sandhills calving system. "We've always been learning. That was why we did the drop-back calving," says Kelsey. "We were running a cow-calf and yearling place at Boggy Creek in Manitoba," she says, and adds the climate was the biggest challenge. It was colder, and there were longer winters. Scours management was a big concern. After reading about the Sandhills method, they talked it over with their farming family members and decided to implement it. We were shifting to a later calving on grass in May and June versus the end of April, she says. They grouped the herd into replacement heifers with second calvers and then the main cow herd. The success was really in the planning out of the grazing system, she explains. They were incorporating bale grazing, and the cows came out of winter pastures with stockpiled grass before transitioning to calving. The timing of year is huge. You have to have a good forage supply that's matched to the requirements of the animals, she says. Once we had a good-sized group of calves on the ground, maybe 150 or 200, we would go out early at daylight, ride through, and when those calves got up to suck, we just moved all the uncalved cows out into the next field, Beasley explains. Kelsey found that there were few risks but plenty of benefits to drop back calving. Disease load-wise, you have those neonates on clean ground, she says, and adds that the herd had much better health with no issue of scours. I would say you also got to be pretty handy with stockmanship, says Kelsey. You're not fighting with those young pairs. You can give that cow time to just be a cow. Erin McKnight and her husband Steve raise commercial cattle in southern Saskatchewan. A portion of their ranch is comprised of tame grass pastures and farm fields that they use to grow green feed. But the majority of their operation is rough, sandy rangeland. In the past, they used to calve cows out in large, rugged sandhill pastures, but that presented a few challenges. In the Sandhills, it's really tough to see what's going on, Erin explains. On this ranch, there's always been a pilot, she explains, and Steve often relies on his plane to help determine what's happening on the land. Over time, they shifted toward calving on flatter, smaller fields. We calve all our pairs in the spring in April and May, then we push them out to grass in the Sandhills after they've been worked in the spring, says Erin. After deciding they preferred working fewer, smaller bunches of calves at spring processing, rather than having a single large roundup, they started pushing pregnant cows to different fields, leaving pairs behind. We just stumbled on that, says Erin. It was naturally what we started doing, and it was a couple years after we started doing it that we both learned that this is studied in an actual system, she explains. Ironically, it is called the Sandhills System. They start with a group of several hundred pregnant cows in the beginning, and with each move, the group gets smaller and smaller. We let pregnant mamas move off and the cows that had babies would linger back, she describes. It's never a perfect split, she notes, but adds that they take care to move pregnant cows out of the pairs at processing time to ensure their future offspring get vaccinated in the next bunch. The health of newborn calves and the time savings has made this method work for the past 8 calving seasons. We can work those bigger calves sooner, and it helps us get those cows out to summer pasture quicker. It works for us out here. It works for our situation. Dr. Lance Males, a large animal veterinarian at Temiskaming Veterinary Services in New Liskeard, Ontario, says that when space is limited, clean bedding is the key. Have enough bedding that calves don't have access to a manure meal, he says. Udders must be clean and dry. Males refers to the first 3 weeks of calving season as the honeymoon period, where producers may not experience a lot of scours. During this period, disease-causing agents are still multiplying in the guts of young calves before they build up in the environment, ready to infect others. Reducing stock density and moving the cow herd to clean ground on a regular basis can prolong the honeymoon phase. The Sandhills calving scheme is great, but you may need to modify the concept if the farm only has one calving area, Dr. Males explains. In situations where winter calving herds have limited space and use a single common handling area for calving cows, producers may opt to move pairs to different yards or pens. One client he worked with would calve cows in freshly bedded pens. All the calves older than a day were moved with their dams to a nearby yard to be fed, he explains. This left the producer with a couple of yards or pens of calves outside, with each yard containing calves that were born within a week of each other. He says, once the youngest calves in a group hit 3 weeks of age, they could be combined with older groups and moved to a larger nearby bush lot. If producers have the space and option to utilize summer calving, Males says it can be an effective way to reduce scours and other sicknesses, as well as decrease labor. With lots of space, newborn calves experience a reduced disease challenge and subsequently lower treatment rates, he says. There is less risk of freezing, lower bedding requirements. Calves tend to be born a bit lighter, so fewer calving difficulties, he concludes.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find all relevant links and information at beefresearch.ca or in the show notes. The Beef Cattle Research Council is funded by the Canadian Beef Cattle Checkoff and strives for excellence in the production of Canadian beef, cattle, and forage through research, innovation, and extension. Tune in every Tuesday as the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast delivers straightforward insights, expert information, and a wealth of practical knowledge for Canadian beef producers. Subscribe now.